number of rows, right? So today we're introducing Diffable data source. Diffable data source was a new paradigm, or is a new paradigm of design that Apple introduced in iOS 13 last year at WWDC 2019. So what is Diffable data source? Diffable data source is the new way, we call it the declarative way of designing our table views and our collection views, right? So today in our discussion, we'll be introducing the way, the modern way, for lack of a better word, the modern way of building our table views and our collection views. And with that, we have many benefits along the way, because with our table views, the way we set it up before, traditionally, at the beginning of the program, for example, we had this idea of having our array collection or our dictionary collection having some sort of property observer on it. So that way, when new items come in from a web service or some data stream, we reload our data, or we reload our table view, right? So that would reload the entire table view. And we know how expensive it is to reload an entire table view. So there comes Diffable data sources, right? Diffable data sources allows, there's this notion of, there's one place, there's one central place that my data lives. So there's nothing as far as like a side effect for my code or anything, because I know there's one central place to retrieve my data at any time in my application. That one place, that construct is known as a snapshot, right? So today along the way, we'll get introduced to different APIs that allows us to use diffable data sources in a modern way in our table views and collection views. If anybody has seen this, which most probably at this point have seen an error like this. So if you want to delete, for example, some item in your table view and you're not properly adhering to removing and adding, you'll get an error that says there's an internal consistency exception, meaning I'm trying to insert one item and I cannot insert it because the data is inconsistent. So that's one of the fixes really quickly that Diffable data sources does. Because if there's one place my data lives, there's no like array or something else manipulating my data. There's only a snapshot of my data. Think of like Firebase, for instance, where Firebase has a snapshot of your data at any point. So this snapshot here is very similar to what like a database Firebase snapshot would be. I could always grab my snapshot and see what data I have at any point in my application. So throughout the talk, throughout the lesson, we'll see this idea of what a snapshot is. And with SwiftUI, I know we haven't done SwiftUI yet, but with SwiftUI introduction last year, with compositional flow layout, which we'll see hopefully this week, and with Diffable data sources, Apple is shifting the way programmers think of code. So no longer are we doing like an imperative approach to setting up our data. We're more doing it in a declarative way. We give the structure of what the outcome could be, and the system will take that and figure out what the outcome of that data should be. So that's like a declarative approach to where iOS is headed. And you'll see more of that in practice as you're dealing with SwiftUI or compositional layout or diffable data sources. Like there's a paradigm shift in the way iOS is going. It's more reactive programming in that sense. So the main class we'll be using today is UI Table View Diffable Data Source. Again, that's a class that got introduced last year at iOS 13. Before that, the only way we would have our data being given to a table view was via the data source methods of self for row and number of items. But today we'll see how to use UI Table View Diffable Data Sources. To go back to the objective, what's the objective? To discuss the new declarative way of handling data sources in iOS. So now we'll know two ways to handle data in iOS. We'll know the traditional way with self for row and number of items, and we'll know diffable data sources. Once you get more comfortable with diffable data sources, it's going to be hard to go back to the previous way. Know how to configure a diffable data source type. We'll get into that. Understand the snapshot, and the snapshot is of class NS Diffable Data Source Snapshot. Understand how to apply it to the data source. And today we'll talk about subclassing, but we won't get into the example of subclassing UI Table View Diffable Data Source. But later in the week, we'll have an example where we subclass Diffable Data Source in order to get access to the traditional data source methods we know. For example, title for row at. Like if you have a table view of sections, how do I get the title for my sections? It's going to be the same method, but now we have to subclass the UI table view diffable data source. And at the end, identify the benefits. One of the benefits I just mentioned here is no longer we will have crashes like that in our application, because right now we'll have one snapshot. We won't have multiple places handling our table view data. It's just one snapshot. You talk to the snapshot, you apply, very similar to if you make a change request. For example, in Firebase, you want to change somebody's photo, you change the photo, you commit the changes, and the change has been done. Or core data, where you execute a fetch request, you commit the changes, and you're done. You save it to the context. Here, you have to, you get your snapshot, you do the changes on your snapshot, and you apply the changes to your data source using the snapshot, and your table view just uploads. And along the way, you get nice transition animations. It's really cool the way it's set up. It's a really good API, very robust API. So we'll talk about UI table view data source, how to set that up. I just mentioned earlier, and Tiffany did bring that up, like before that, we'd have to use self for row, a number of rows to set up our table view. But going forward, the more you get comfortable using diffable data source, the better you'll see the flexibility of it. And the things you could do is limitless as far as like being interactive and being dynamic with your code, and not being scared to like, oh, maybe the data is inconsistent, or maybe I might get a runtime crash because somebody might delete something and the data is not updated yet. The snapshot is taking care of that, so our jobs got easier. Our apps have less crashes at this point. So along the way, this API brings flexibility, it brings animation effects, it brings one source of truth. Throughout the talk, we'll be talking about source of truth. When I mention source of truth, it's where do I get my data, right? Whenever I talk about source of truth, or you hear it at the WWDC talk, it's about data. Where do I get my data? Where do I go to get my data? In our case here, where do I go? I go to the snapshot. The snapshot is going to get me my current data for my table view or collection view. Everything we talk about today is interchangeable between table view and collection view. The API could be used for both. And a quick spoiler here, table views are getting more included into collection views. So pretty soon, once you have collection views, you're not gonna be using table views anymore, because collection view itself, especially this year, acts as a table view if you want it to. So just, I'm sorry? Was there a question? Yeah. So collection views are very, very more flexible now. You could make table views. The thing is really awesome, the way the APIs have been improving year over year, especially from last year to this year. So here we set up our table view, same as we do. Either we do it programmatically, which we might do today, or in storyboard. But the big new thing here is the UI table view data source. What is this UI table view data source thing? What is it? Well, it's a class. We said that it's a class. It's a generic class, right? Here it's a generic class. It's a generic class because now you could use any items on it. The only constraint to those items, they have to be hashable. Anybody recall what hashable is?
Unique, or like not repeated?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like there could only be one kind of it?
Yeah, there could be only one kind of it, and that's because it becomes, there's a hash function. If my type conforms to hashable, it makes it unique, so you cannot have two of the same items in that collection. So the hashable protocol allows for uniqueness, as Chelsea says. Everybody agrees? Okay. Yep. Very good. Yeah. So here we have two types on our table view data source. We have a section identifier. The section identifier is the section for the table view or the section for the collection view. You could have one section, you could have many sections, right? So here is why it has to be hashable, because my sections need to be different from each other in order for it to be of that type. And the item identifier, again, two types. You have your section, and in the section, you have items. So the item identifier also has to be hashable. So on that generic class UI table view data source, it's a generic type. First type is the section type. It could be any type. It just has to be hashable. And the second type is the item identifier. Again, it could be anything. It just has to be hashable. Those are the two constraints. The only constraints, they have to be hashable. So in this example here that Apple uses throughout the talk and throughout introducing this API, it's good practice to have your section be of an enum type, because here you could have more sections. In our case today, we'll have one section. We'll just call it main. But you could easily have multiple sections, right? You could easily have multiple sections here. For example, if you're creating some sort of like compass app or whatever is in the north would be in the north section. So here you could have case north, south, east, west, and now you have 4 sections. So what we know about enums, if I make it case iterable, it's very easy for me to know how many sections I have, and it just becomes more flexible. So if you start with your section being of an enum type, half your coding flexibility and the way you're able to scale will be taken care of, because now I could just add more sections on that enum type. Any questions about that? We just discussed the first type here on the UI table view diffable source. And we said here, it's good practice to make it an enum type. So I could have multiple sections. I could have main, secondary, primary, or I could have north, south, east, west. I could have days of the week, whatever sections my table view is. If it's Game of Thrones, I could have season 1 to season 7. 7, correct? There's only 7 seasons, correct? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, very good. Agreement
From
there?
what I heard that last season was very bad.
Right.
That's why we don't talk about it.
And the lesson is over. Okay, so so we spoke about section identifiers. Let's talk about the actual items. So the items is the items in the section, right? In the example we'll do later in this week, we'll have an item. It's going to have a name, price, identifier. So that item, whatever item you want in your collection view or table view, it has to conform to the hashable protocol. If it's a native type, like for example, int string is hashable already by default, so we don't have to do anything else. But if it's your own custom type here being an item, it has to conform to hashable. And here we're using the hash function to say what value we want to be the hash value. In that case, we're just gonna use the identifier, because the identifier here is unique. Any questions before we continue? Okay, so how do you declare a data source? Well, you start with a variable, an instance variable, give it a name. Here we call it data source. The class is UI table view diffable data source. And here section represents this enum type here, section. And the item, again, both has to be hashable. And the item here represents our custom type item. Okay. To configure the data source now, we go down here and we have our data source instance, because here it hasn't been initialized. It hasn't been initialized here. It hasn't been initialized, so we have to initialize it. So we initialize it here with the data source. Again, here, this data source represents a subclass. We'll see that more on day 2 of diffable data sources. Day 1 is going to be a simple approach. Day 2 will subclass the actual table view data source. And here we just call it the data source. And we initialize our instance with the data source here. So what's new? Well, we have a closure. It takes a table view or a collection view, right? Again, this is very interchangeable. It could be a table view or it could be a collection view. The code is the same. So we have our table view instance. We declare the table view already here in that case. We have a cell provider. The cell provider is a closure. The cell provider is a closure. The closure has 3 arguments. It has a pointer to the table view or the collection view. It has an index path. And look at that now, it has the item. So no longer I have to say, hey, I have a 2D array. How do I access my item? How do I get to the item? No longer am I saying array, index path, that section, index path, that row. I'm not saying that anymore. Because right away, I have the item. It doesn't care if it's a 2D array, a 1-dimensional array, I just get the item. So now I could have that item here and use the item and set it up myself. So this code here in the closure, so those 3 lines of code here in the closure, this is very similar to your cell for row. So whatever cell for row logic you'll be doing, you do it here in the closure, okay? You return a cell, and contrary to our cell for row, you could just return nil, because this here returns nil if you want here, if that's the case. So you just return your cell and you're done. With the table view data source, the diffable data source, you have an animation. Do I want it to automatically animate? Do I want it to give me a fade animation? Do I want it to animate from top, bottom? As when I'm talking about animation, as I'm entering new things, what kind of animation do I want? So you have that flexibility here. Again, that API is very modern. It gives us nice animations along the way, as opposed to our regular cell for row and number of rows as we used before. We spoke about the cell provider. The cell provider is a closure, 3 arguments here. And we spoke about the animation on it. There's automatic, there's fade, top, bottom, there's left, there's right, there's more here. If you're curious for that, you could look at the documentation and look at default animations or row animations for table views. So we spoke about setting up the diffable data source. Any questions about the data source? We'll get into the code, obviously, at this point, but now I'm just introducing what we go into. But if there's any questions, feel free to stop me. Now we'll go into the snapshot, right? What does a snapshot look like? Actually, let me send that out. The lesson is on Canvas, by the way, but let me just suck it out. It's on Canvas on today's calendar, but this is the lesson I'm following right now. And we're on number 6. We're talking about the snapshot. The snapshot is the heart of where's my data? I want to change my data. How do I change my data? Well, anything that has to do with my data, I get access to the snapshot. In this example here, again, it's the source of truth. As you delve into SwiftUI, anything post iOS 13 or iOS 13 and further, you'll always hear developers talking about from Apple about source of truth. What is the source of truth? Where do I go for my data? In our example here, we'll go for the data from the snapshot. So the snapshot is anytime I want to get data, I go to the snapshot. It always has the updated point of data in my table view or collection. How do I set it up? I set it up by using this class, NS Diffable Data Source Snapshot. Again, it's generic, very similar to our Diffable Data Source. Takes 2 types here, a section and an item. Has to match our data source. So this signature here matches our Diffable Data Source signature. Section item has to match. So now I get back a snapshot instance. On the snapshot instance here, if I want to add my section, in that case, I have 1 section. All I do is say snapshot, append sections, main. 1 section. If I have multiple sections, I add multiple sections. Next question the snapshot is asking is, give me the items for the snapshot. In that case, I'm just going to give it all the items. Whatever items, wherever I'm getting the items from, I'm giving it all the items here. So now it has the sections, it has the items. The last thing to do is say data source, apply this snapshot. This is the current snapshot, apply it. The minute we say apply the snapshot, our table view re-renders and the data is updated. So there's no reload data here. I'm not reloading all the data. If it's 1 item, it just inserts the item. If it's many items, it inserts the items accordingly. With an animation, in that case, I have false here, but I could say true. Give me an animation. And based on the animation I defined here, it would give me the animation type. Okay? So that's it, basically, for snapshots and diffable data sources. And the next thing is there's many more actions you could do. Like here, I could say, get me the current snapshot. I have the data source instance. I could say, data source, get me your snapshot. I have the snapshot, then I could manipulate the snapshot. I could query the snapshot for information, like give me the sections you have. In each section, I probably want to do some logic. So there's many things you could do here. Once you have that snapshot, the data source, you're free to go and free to reign. So the big vocabulary words we should know after this lesson and by the end of this week when we've seen diffable data sources many times is UI table view diffable data source. That's the heart of what we're using. Collection views we'll get to once we talk about collection view compositional layout. Diffable snapshot, everything has it, whether you're dealing with collection views or table views, they all have this snapshot, right? Remember, snapshot is the source of truth. Section identifier is the section type in our generic type, and the item identifier. Next, this notion of apply. Well, where do we use apply? We use the apply right here. If you don't apply, your table view doesn't change, right? You have to apply. It's very similar to saying commit. Commit those changes. You don't commit, there was like no change, nothing happened. So you have to apply the changes. And the snapshot is the snapshot instance, or at any point you could get the snapshot. The item identifier, we'll see how to use that later. Like if you want to get some sort of item back at any point, you could query the data source for the item identifier for the index path to get the item. And the cell provider is the closure we get from setting up our data source. It has the table view or the collection view pointer. It has the index path, and it has the actual item you want in your rows. Okay, any questions before we continue?
Nope.
Okay, all right. So let's continue on. Let's now build an app that uses diffable data sources. Our app is basically a counter app. It's gonna start from 10, count down to 0. And we'll call our project Countdown. So let's go ahead and start a new project somewhere. So let's go to Xcode, not Xcode beta, but Xcode 11. Create a new project. It's a single view app. Project name, we'll call it Countdown. Swift, storyboard, all that is good. Click next. And save it to the desktop, that's fine. Simulator, and make sure to change my preferences so we could all see. All right, great. All right, so let's all head. Do we all have our project ready to go?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't have the whole grid, so I might want some audio feedback because I can't see everybody right now. So feel free to jump in, either stop me if you have any questions or acknowledgement as we go in building this app. Okay, so we have our project, it's called Countdown. Now we'll navigate to the view controller. Actually, before we navigate to the view controller, let's go to the storyboard because I think I want the nav bar. So let's go to the storyboard and just embed the view controller. Embed the view controller in a nav controller, just like that. We'll do everything in code except apart from this. So just embed your view controller in a nav controller. And go back to your view controller here. And let me get some space. Okay. Great. So let's get started. Well, first, let's create a table view. So here we'll create a table view or declare a table view. You have table view. All the things we need. The new things, I'll make sure to put comments here. So define source. Define the data source instance. But not just data source, but define the UI table view data source instance. Here, private var data source type UI table view diffable data source. Right. So here, if you do not give it the generic types, you'll get an error saying reference to generic requires arguments, right? So here we need arguments. For now, we could put placeholders. I could say int and int. And implicitly unwrap it here. Why does int and int work? as section identifier and item identifier?
Because they can both be an int or an int. The section could be an int, well, is an int, and the item can be an int.
Okay. And what is the technical terminology? There's a constraint on our diffable data source, right? What's the constraint and why does int work?
Hash.
Hash, right? So Ben says they're both hashable.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Very good. So because if we had, for example, if we had a struct person here, just like that, and I tried to use person here and build, it's going to give me an error because now it says person does not conform to hashable. Make sense? Cool?
Yes.
So the only thing I'd have to do is make my person hashable. And now the error goes away. Very good. Excellent. Cool. Great. So we have our person. We have our two ints, but our app calls for the sections will just be one section for now. That's okay. But for now, we'll just create an enum type. We'll call it section, and we'll have one case called main. For now, we just have one section. Table view. Okay. So now I could put my section in here.
Does it matter that the enum is inside of the class, or should it be outside of the class?
It doesn't matter here. For now, we'll just keep it constrained to the view controller.
Okay.
Yep, good question. Right now, it only pertains to the view controller, so it's totally okay to have it in the view controller here.
Gotcha.
And again, our section here is fine because enum conforms to hashable. Okay, cool. So we have defined our table view, we've defined our data source. Other things we'll be using in this application, we'll use a timer. So let's create a timer instance here of type timer class. And the timer is part of the run loop. So this timer will be used to start a timer basically with some interval. So we'll have the timer, we'll give it a target action, we'll give it a start interval or some interval of like 1 second. So every 1 second is gonna call a particular function and that function will count down the time. So this is what the timer is for. And next we'll have some start interval, say 10 seconds here. Great. So now we have our instance variables all set up. We have our diffable data source all set up as well. We could continue on. We'll configure. Again, you can configure this in Storyboard, but here we'll just do it in code. It will be a bit more flexible. Configure table view. Right now, our table view doesn't have a value. It's nil. So let's give it a value. We'll say table view. Table view. The frame will just be the entire frame of the view. So here, view.bounds is the entire frame. What type of table view do we want? For now, we'll just make it a plain. If you had like a section, if you had multiple sections, you could have done groups, insert groups, but here we just have a plain table view. Great. Next, we want to deal with the layout. We want to lay out our view controller. Not view controller, sorry. We want to lay out our table view. So we lay out our table view using auto resizing mask, which is not auto layout. It's just basically dragging the table view 0 all around. This is what we're doing here. Only in code. So we'll give it the height, or sorry, the width of the entire view, which is flexible width. It grows with the width of the view. Whatever the view is, it takes up the view's width. That's what flexible width is. And next, we'll say flexible height. Again, it just takes up whatever the height of the view is. So this here is setting up a table view to take up the entire bounds of the view, okay? And this auto resizing mask here is not auto layout. It's basically before auto layout, the way you would set up is using this auto resizing mask, moving things along with struts and stuff, but this is just setting that up in code. Next, we'll give our table view background some color. Here we'll just use system background. Not forget to add it to the subview of the view, table view. And what else are we missing here? If you're doing a table view programmatically, what else are we missing?
Constraints?
Oh, yeah, you did.
Those are constraints.
So,
Okay.
The cell, yes, very good, sir.
Oh, the cell. Okay.
So the cell, very good. So here we want to register some cell. We don't have
Wait, so flexible width and flexible height just means that it could be whatever size.
whatever the size of the view is. The view meaning the view controller's view.
Oh, so this is gonna take over the entire view.
Exactly.
Okay.
Very good. And Mr. Bien said we forgot our register. Don't forget that part. So here we need a cell. We'll just use the generic table view cell and register that. We'll give it some name. We'll just call it cell. And we should be pretty good here with our table view setup. So we'll call configure table view here in the viewed load. Actually, let's not implement. I'm not gonna implement viewed load. I'll actually implement view did appear, and I'll show us why later. So super view did appear, animated, and here call configure table view. All right. I'll pause there for any questions before we continue. But our table view is pretty much good to go in that particular.
all right, I have a question.
Yep.
Are you gonna implement the view did appear and view did disappear for the snapshot?
We're not gonna do did disappear because we
Oh.
just have one view for now.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, so let's move on. So we
Wait,
configured our.
could I see the enum again?
Oh, I'm not showing the whole code. Sorry. There we go.
Okay, so section, we're enum is hashable, so we're putting the section in the data source,
Yes.
and that's where we're gonna get our items from.
The items will be generated. We'll generate the items later, but the items will be all integers.
Oh, okay, so the section. Oh, so the enum is just the sections, and then we only have one section called main.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It could be called anything, but here we just call it main.
Okay.
All right, very good. So let's see, maybe we could do some steps here. The new steps for like data store stuff. So this is step 1. I could call this kind of like step 2. What else? We haven't done anything else here. Okay, we'll go into about step 3. So we'll go configure the data source. Configure data source. Okay, so here we're configuring the data source. Very similar to what we just did in the lesson overview. So we have our data source instance. Again, here, it's nil. It hasn't been assigned any value. So we'll go ahead and assign it some value here using UI table view, diffable data source. What are the types we're passing in here?
Section and an int.
Section, thank you very much, and an int. And autocomplete doesn't work all the way here. Put an open parens, right? Put an open parens and start typing in table, everybody. Let me do this again. Put an open parens, start typing in table, yes?
Yeah.
Yo.
And press enter. Okay. Press enter for the placeholder where it says table view. It's expecting a table view here. That's our table view instance. So here, just put our table view instance here. Table view. All right. Everybody okay on that step?
Yes.
Yes.
Press the tab key over. So now you should be highlighted in blue, correct?
Yes.
And press enter. Okay, so now those are the 3 arguments we said we have from that cell provider closure. So here we just put in a table view name, table view, tab over, index path. Again, those could be any names. Tab over, we'll just call this item, and tab over again, and remove the code. Okay. For now, we could just return nil here because you can return nil here, right? Build. Make sure you have no errors at this point before we continue.
But you didn't put it in the view disappear.
No, I haven't called it yet. I'm just making sure we have no errors yet at this point.
Okay.
Yep, we'll definitely call it there after the configure table view.
All right.
Very good. Everybody okay?
Yep.
All right, let's continue. And Don, let's continue. So we need a cell. So we'll just say cell equal to, this is going to be familiar. This is very, very similar, very familiar to yourself for all. So here we have a cell. We'll say table view dot dequeue reusable cell with identifier. Identifier is cell. Why cell? Because cell, we defined it here. We registered it here. And index path is just our regular index path that we have here. It refers to this index path. Great.
I'm having a little bit of a problem. So
Oh, okay.
I have the data source is equal to UI table diffable data source section int. Yeah.
And you have an open parens.
Yeah.
You
With the
typed in table
view.
view. Yep.
Yep. Cell provider.
Cell provider is the closure.
I have all of this here, but it's telling me, can I assign type UI table view diffable data source to view controller that section? I'm not putting a view controller that section. I'm just putting.
What do you have?
section.
You have this section here, right?
Yeah, but it's not.
If you're having any issues, just to make sure you just do this. Let's see if that's gonna solve your problem. Do view controller that section here, and do view controller section here. Those are the only two places we use the section.
Oh wait, did you change the first data source to section?
Yep.
Oh, okay, that might have been why. So when I do that and do that. Okay, it's fixed. Thank you.
Okay.
It's because for the when we define data source, I still had it as int. So I had to change
Okay, got it. That's
so
good,
when I
right?
changed the section, yeah.
That's very good because now it's type safe. You cannot just do any random things here. Everything has to match.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. So we have our cell. We could just return that. We could just return our cell here. And let's actually say cell.text label.text. Because remember here, we have the item already. Everybody with me?
Yes.
The third argument is the item. So I could just say item. Actually, change this from item to just like value. It's not like an item like that. And here I could use string interpolation and just do value. Okay. Value is an integer. Why is it an integer? Because we say it's an integer here. Any questions about that? Hello?
No.
Okay. All right. So this is our configured data source. And we are pretty much good. For now, we'll just do an example and then we'll refactor this. So let's take care of the snapshot. So setup, we'll configure this setup snapshot. And the snapshot is var snapshot. How do I instantiate the snapshot if we were to look at the lesson?
It's equal. Oh, we said that it was equal to snapshot. Damn.
And that's difficult data source snapshot.
NS Diffable data source
NS
snapshot.
Diffable, very good. So NS Diffable
Okay.
snapshot, that's the class there. And the types need to match here. So I just say view controller dot section, and I'll say int, and open parens, close parens, and I have my snapshot. I wish I had more space here. So we have our snapshot. What else are we doing on the snapshot? What else does the snapshot need? Append
Any
section.
sections.
Very good. So add sections. So here we'll say snapshot dot append sections, expects an array of identifiers, an array of sections, which makes sense. But our table view has only one, so we're just passing main, like that. What's the next thing we need?
Items.
Items. So snapshot dot append items. It expects an array of integers. For now, I could just pass in some integers here. 9, 10, like that. It's pretty happy. Are we done?
No, now we need to apply.
Now we need to apply it. So snapshot, very good. Well, not snapshot. Data source dot apply snapshot. Okay. And here we could give it an optional animation.
Alex,
Yes.
I'm having an issue where it says my use of value is ambiguous. I don't know where it's defined.
Your use of value. So we change item here to value
Okay.
in the 3 arguments in the closure.
Hmm.
Do you have value?
I do. I just changed it, so that works now. But also, it's asking me to change table view to self, and I mean
Table view. Which table view?
table view within that function, where it says table view.vq or usable cell.
Here.
Yeah, it says reference to property table view enclosure requires explicit self, but it looks the same.
No.
Table view. So I have the arrow. You are table view. And yeah, I'm not sure. I'm just gonna leave this off to turn off the error, and then I'll come back to it.
Okay, and we'll touch bases once we run it again.
Okay.
All right, cool. So here I apply my snapshot, and this particular function here, apply, takes 1 or 2 arguments. The second argument could be some sort of animation. So here the animation could be false, or it could be true. So we'll put it as true, and we'll say data source right here, type of an set type of animation on the source. So the type of animation will say data source dot default animation is fade. The default animation, if we don't say fade here, is automatic, just for your references. So you could play around with the animations there and see how they work based on your use case. So that's it for now, minus our timer. Let's go ahead and test this. Before we test this, we need to make sure we call configure data source here. So configure data source. So
Wait, can you?
What on?
Yeah.
Add sections, add items or section, and apply.
I do have hiccups. I'm sorry.
To the
It's true. And we don't have a completion technically.
no completion, but you could have a completion if you want something else to happen. Good point. So you could take 3 arguments as well.
And for the data source, we do that right before we set up the snapshot. We would do data source.
The data source apply here. You do it after the snapshot.
No. The default row.
Oh, this guy, yeah. I just set it up right after we have the instance configured.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
And thank you, Greg. I am about to right now.
Put a plate on your head.
I know. No, Nigerian culture, they say to take a piece of string from your clothes and put it on your head and it goes away.
I think that too, yeah. I've come across that one as well. And the plate one and scaring one, somebody could probably scare you somewhere. Okay, so in our video up here, make sure to call table view, configure data source. Yes, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's give this a run and see what we have. And then Chelsea, I'll send out the snippet for you once we have this running.
Alex, can you scroll to the bottom of the configure data source function?
Yep.
Thank you.
Right here?
Yeah.
Okay. We should have values in our table view, correct?
I was gonna say, did we need to do anything else on the view controller apart from just? All right, hold on, sorry.
Nope. Somebody type it out and somebody could let me know what the question is. All right, so run the app again.
Never mind, got it.
Okay, awesome. Run the app again and make sure, did everybody get their value showing up? I need audio because I cannot see everybody.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
did you see the little animation happening? Like it's kind of slowly went in from 1 down to 10?
I'm gonna try it right now.
Error.
How you slow it down is the real question.
How you slow it down? You could create your custom animation. Or we could put a delay. For now, let's do a delay. I think that should be okay. Let's put a delay here. So back in your view did appear, put a delay, dispatch queue dot main dot async after delay here. So select async after deadline. And just put in dot now plus like 1 second and put in your configure here. So, okay. Luba, what's your error?
It's on the line where like data source dot apply.
Data source dot apply. What does the error say? Data source dot apply. Right here? You have apply snapshot, right?
Yeah.
What's the error say?
It's like a long error. UI table view data source return the new cell. Yeah. The cell is new.
Make sure, or return cell here, right?
Where is this?
Configure data source?
No, I have return nil, not cell. Okay. Okay.
Sorry, can you please scroll up a little bit just to where you put the async after something? All right, async after deadline. Which one is that? Is that the one that has the execute goes to void?
I'll never do it again for you.
Why are you doing dispatch period for? What's the reason?
1 second, somebody wanted a delay, so I'm just adding a delay so that the view comes up first before we see the values.
Oh.
So Tiffany, you want to select the one that says async after deadline, dispatch and execute.
Okay.
And then for the dispatch time, it just wants some like time interval. If you say dot now means the time right now. So I could add 1 second by saying +1.
Oh, that's good. And then
tab over and press enter. It's a closure. And in the closure, you put whatever you want, whatever action you want to happen. In that case, we just want to call.
We want a function, right?
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you.
There's a question?
Yeah, I got an error.
What kind of error?
Accept invalid number of sections. The number of sections contained.
You should just have 1 section here.
Yeah, I got this error on the data source that apply. I don't know why. This happened right after I added the countdown. I mean the delay.
Me too.
Let me see what I have.
Yeah, I have the same error.
1 second. It should happen for me as well.
I was afraid of you, Alex.
Yep. There we go. We'll put a delay here. It did appear. I configured my table view. Table view is ready to go. I put a delay. For now, let's just remove this. I'll figure out that problem later, because that's not the goal of today. and run the app again and just make sure we have our items coming in.
You deleted your data source.
Oh, sorry. Okay, just make sure everybody has the items coming in. Yes?
Yeah.
All right. Luba, did your problem solve?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on and then we'll come back. Question?
So that the issue I was having with the table view in the
So
function?
basically your configure, right? Your configure data source?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll send that over to you.
Was something supposed to animate? Because I just get the numbers pop up and that was
Yeah, it's supposed to animate if you put in, so take a look at line 60 on my screen.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't see anything really happening on mine.
1 second. All right. Chelsea, I stuck it out.
Okay.
All right. We'll have some more animations happening once we put the timer in. Not animations, but you'll see the countdown better once we put the timer in.
Okay.
Okay, cool. All right, let's continue. So we have our timer here. We need to go ahead and configure our timer. We write some helper functions to configure our timer. We'll call it start countdown. So right after our configure, we'll have a function here. We'll call it start countdown.
Should our numbers be backwards?
Backwards. Yours is coming in backwards?
Well, no, mine is coming in 1, 2,
No, no,
3,
no.
10.
This is just a test. We haven't done the actual goal of the application yet.
Okay.
Yeah, they're coming backwards.
Alex,
yes.
I copied your code and put it on my thing, and I'm still getting errors.
What error are you getting?
Hold on. It's saying expression type parentheses is ambiguous without more context.
Your type. So my diffable data source here says view controller that section. Make sure on line 22 yours is the same.
22.
Oh shit.
Hey, this is a family show. Marjette, okay? Did it run?
Give me 1 second. I'm fixing it right now.
Chelsea, are you good, by the way?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. How are we doing?
It's still giving me that error.
All right, let me, for purposes of time, let me just slide that out to you. Okay, I just locked it out to you, the view controller.
Okay.
All right, very good. So run that and make sure, once you run it, let me know that everything is okay, okay?
Okay.
All right, so we have some helper functions to write. We have a start countdown. We have decrement, counter, and lastly, we have, Okay, those are the functions we'll write to get everything up and running. So let's start out with the countdown. So in our countdown here, we'll say if timer, the timer is coming from up here. Make sure you have timer. On line 24, we have a timer instance. So make sure you have timer instance and also make sure you have start interval here. It starts from 10. Everybody? All right. So let's go down. Christian? Oh, that's amazing. Okay, cool. So here we'll save timer equal to nil, or not equal to nil, sorry. If it's not equal to nil and we get to the start down timer, then just invalidate the timer. Invalidate the timer basically means stop the timer, right? Stop the timer, stop it. Invalidate, it's done. So if the timer is not equal to nil, invalidate the timer, because we'll have a refresh control to kind of restart the timer when we just want to restart it. So if we want to restart it, that means we call start countdown. That means we want to invalidate the timer. anytime we call this, we want to invalidate it and start again. So now here, for people who haven't seen timer yet, the timer API, here we'll configure the timer and configure the timer, set interval for, in that case, for countdown, assign a method that gets called every second in our case, because that's what we're doing, but it could be any time interval for you if you're using this API. So next we'll say timer equal to timer, the timer class itself. So here, this is a static type. Schedule, I'm gonna take the first choice. Hopefully that's the one I want here. Schedule with time interval repeats. No, that's not the right one. You want one of the target actions. So schedule timer, this one. Timer with target action. Very good. So select the one that says time interval, target, selector, user info, and repeats. Everybody? You have more screen real estate because my fonts are bigger, so I cannot really see. Yeah. Everybody has it? Yes?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
So for the time interval here, we'll just say 1 second. So every 1 second. 1 second. Target itself, this is very similar to what we do with a button or any sort of action. The selector, what do we want to call? Selector, we want to call decrement counter. Decrement. Oh, it's not an Objective-C function yet. Put at Objective-C in front of decrement counter and call decrement counter. User info, we're not passing in any information, so just put nil here. Repeats, well, we want it to repeat, so true. So here we just set up a timer. The timer has a time interval of every 1 second. Every 1 second, what does it do? Well, it's gonna call this decrement counter every second. And it's gonna repeat every second. Okay? We need to reset, at this point, we'll reset our starting value or starting interval, because maybe it got to 0 because our timer is done. So we want to reset it. So we'll say starting interval gets reset to 10. And here 10 is just seconds. Okay. And now, lastly, we have to do the snapshot. So that's great. So we're going to do this snapshot again. And the snapshot we have up there, we'll remove it because we'll be calling this function. So here we'll set up snapshot again. Set up snapshot. Okay, very good. So somebody else is going to tell me how to set up my snapshot here. How do I, go ahead.
That the
NS, right? NS diffable, yep. Thanks to autocomplete, we'll get it right. Because other than that, I know it's a bit wordy. So here I have my section and I have my integer and this. So I have my snapshot, great. Very similar to what we have up there, but we'll just keep doing it. What's the next step we're doing? Somebody else? We have our snapshot instance, what else?
Are we adding the
sections?
Adding the sections. In-tune minds think alike, is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
In terms of reading 60, 62, and 64, that's what Intune is doing.
And then now we want to add our items. So it's an array of items. We'll add in a starting value, which is starting value. So it's going to start at 10. Start at 10. What's the final thing we need to do?
apply.
Apply. Data source, apply, snapshot. And here we'll say animate. And I'll just pass in false for now. We build. So our yes.
Why are we doing this again? And how come it's different from how we excuse me, the first time.
There's nothing different here. This is the same thing, minus like the animation part.
No, before we didn't put start interval. We actually wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Oh, because remember what I showed earlier was just like a test of what, like we wanted to see results of our snapshot.
So we don't want to keep it like that.
No, we're gonna actually refactor it. We'll refactor it and then we'll call start timer instead, or start countdown.
So in the first append one where we had, can you scroll up a little bit, please?
We're actually going up there now to refactor.
Okay.
That. Yep. But I want us to keep it there for our own reference.
Wait, I still need right at the bottom for the, okay, just the data source that apply. That's all. Sorry.
No problem. Okay, so let's continue on. So as Tiffany said this was just for illustration purposes. Let's just comment this out for now. Okay. If you just want to test this out, this is there for you. Everybody with me? Hello? Audio?
Yes.
All right, cool. But now we'll just call the function we just wrote. We'll call start countdown. Okay. And in start countdown, we're taking care of the snapshot. Tiff?
Yeah, so after the fade, we can comment the rest of that out and just put start countdown.
Yep. Because this here was just to get our table view, make sure that everything is wired correctly.
Right. Okay, good. All right. I was wondering what was going on.
That's good. That's good. Because you don't want to repeat yourself. You're like, hey, what's going on? Why do we have so many things?
Right.
Yep. Uh-huh. So start countdown is going to call our function here, set up our timer. Once we set up our timer, we'll add our snapshot. And the snapshot, we apply it. It starts at 10. Okay? It starts at 10. Well, it calls, what does it call? It calls, our timer calls decrement counter. Decrement counter needs to do some logic. So let's go ahead and do the logic in the decrement counter. Okay, let's continue on. We said anytime we want to get access to the data, what do we do? We get access to the snapshot. So here, get access to the snapshot to manipulate data. Snapshot is the source of truth. Yeah. Great. So let's get snapshot. Snapshot. How do we get the snapshot here? We get it from the data source. Right. Actually, let me go back for us to see what our snapshot looks like. So if I do snapshot here, you see it's the type that we illustrated, section and an integer. So we have our snapshot. Great. Let's continue on. I'll have a guard statement here to make sure that my starting value, starting interval is greater than 0 because it's counting down, it's decrementing, right? If it's not greater than 0, I want to invalidate it. Or if it's less than 0 or 0, I want to invalidate it. And I want to call my ship function and return. So if it's 0, right? If it's 0, I invalidate the timer. I call the ship function. That's just going to add something extra to our table view and return. But if it's 10, if it's 1 to 10, I come down outside my guard statement here. I decrement my starting interval, decrement my starting interval, decrement it. So it goes 10, 9, 8, to 0. When it's 0, it doesn't come back down here, it invalidates. Everybody with me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Then I want to go ahead and say snapshot. Again, everything you're doing on the table view is the snapshot, right? Very simple to use once you start getting the hang of it. Now I want to append something new to my table view. It's an array of stuff. What do I want to add here? Well, starting value. If the starting value was 10, it gets here, it's 9, it's now 9. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
And at that point, 9 is inserted in table view. Okay, so a new row gets inserted in our table view. Every time we say append, a new value gets added because we didn't remove anything, we just appended. As long as you keep appending, new rows keeps adding. And lastly, we say data source that apply our snapshot, and we'll say animating differences true here, because we want a nice little animation effect going, okay? So this is the document counter. Anybody wants me to review anything here? There's nothing new there per se that is new to us. We just did it with the snapshot. Here we're just like updating the table view basically. And we're updating the table view using the snapshot here. We get a snapshot instance here, which has been configured already. And it's the latest snapshot. Whatever the snapshot is at that point, that's what we get. There's no like querying the array for, oh, how many items do you have right now? Are you in sync with what I'm seeing on the screen? Nothing like that. Snapshot is what is the table view showing right now. That's why I mentioned this source of truth here. What is the table view showing right now? It's showing 10, great. So 10, if I add 9, now I have 10 and 9. Great, apply the changes. Now I just inserted 9 into my array, into my table view. And I apply the changes. Last function to write is our ship function. And here again, we get in the snapshot.
Now this is so cool. It works already. I checked
Whoa.
it.
All right, so lesson is over. All right, so we have our snapshot here. We say snapshot dot append items. And here, when we call ship, now be careful, when we call ship here, it's at 0. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to append -1, which is not a valid value. We'll come to that later. So append -1, and then same as we did before, just apply our snapshot changes, animate differences here. What do we want to do? True. So we did that for a purpose. We're going to fix that last bit in the completion for the data source. We added -1 to imply that we want to add something extra. -1 is not a valid number. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, cool. So we have our ship ready to go. We have our document counter ready to go. We have our countdown ready to go. We need to do some code in our data source. I'm sorry?
The last thing on the bottom after snapshot.
The last thing in the bottom. You mean in the ship function?
Yeah. Just it was the same.
Go ahead, Luba.
What's the ship function for?
The ship function is to add an extra row in our array, in our table view, which we'll come to now. So the ship function gets called when our timer is invalid.
Okay.
We want to add like an extra row to say something.
Okay.
Okay, very good. So keep going here. Where's my data source? Right here. I am going in my completion right here. Okay, so here we need to do some logic. No longer we just like showing the value. We want to do some logic here. Well, what's the logic? If item or identify, what do you call it, value? If value equal to -1, that means the thing was invalid. We want to do some logic. Else, we want to do something else, right? We just want to show the row. So just copy or cut Command X, line 51, Command X, and Command V. Okay, so if it's -1, we want to do something different. We'll say cell.textLabel.text equal to app launched, and we'll just put a little rocket ship here. This is good times. For the emoji keyboard, if just a refresher, for the emoji keyboard, Control Command Space to bring up the emoji keyboard, Control Command Space to bring up the emoji keyboard to get our rocket ship. And then we'll just say all looks good so far. If Crashlytics, which career view, and everybody who's on test flight added, correct? Silence. Did we add Crashlytics?
No.
No. So added, right? So pod install Crashlytics, right? Pod.
Gotcha.
Right, Crashlytics. So we get updates when things crashes. Okay, so here we have our cell, and to get our cell expanding, we'll just say cell.textLabel.number of lines equals 0. That way we get all our our entire sentence shown on screen.
Should we put that before our sentence, or it doesn't really matter?
Doesn't really matter. It's just configuring the text label. Good question. Cool. All right. I think we should be able to test. We don't have the refresh yet. That's okay. But let's go ahead and test it. Everybody good? Can we test?
Yes.
Okay, so let's run it.
Sorry.
And look at that. We have a nice little animation happening. It's counting down every second and adding a row every second. And we get to 0, and our shift function got called, and then we have app launched. Did everybody get that?
Yep.
Yes, very good. So here we didn't have to use any property observer. Like there's no way in our code here that we're saying some array. Like there's nothing saying like var items equal to some array, right? And did set, right? With some like table view that reload. There's none of that here. And we know what reload would do. Reload would never give us this animation. It would just reload the whole table. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Right. So once you keep using diffable data sources, you'll see how really cool that API is. If anything, it took a little while for Apple to give it to us, but it's really Christmas, right? For like doing things and just having like nice little animations happening. With 5 more minutes, we could probably add a refresh so that it refreshes our countdown. So let's write that, and then we'll wrap up the class. Any questions before we go ahead?
So I'm kind of confused as to with the application of the snapshot. So does it override the current instance of the data source when you apply it on the snapshot?
Well, it's not overriding; it's modifying, right? I mean, you could say override, but I would use the word modifying your data.
Okay.
Right? Because when we called ship, what did it do? Well, it added a new row, correct? And how did we add a new row? We added a new row. We got the snapshot at that current state. We added a new item to it, which was -1, right? And we applied that change
onto the data source.
When we apply that change, it queries again the completion here, right? For that change. Give me the cell for that row. All right. In that case, we check to see if it's -1, because if it's -1, it's here. So -1, we do a different configuration for ourselves.
That makes sense.
So anything you want to do anywhere, you just get access to your snapshot. And that snapshot is always current. Does that answer your question? And
yeah.
No more confusion, correct?
Yes.
I don't want to have any confusion there with this API. That API is pretty cool to use.
I didn't really believe the keyword on the snapshot append items. I thought it was really more like.
You didn't believe it, you said?
Yeah.
So you don't believe append some item as an array?
Yeah, I didn't believe it until
until you saw it. Okay, yeah, that's good. No, ask the questions. If you have questions, ask them for sure. And there's much more you could do here, but this is just introducing us to what it could do. So if that's it, let's add some more code and then we'll wrap it up here. So what do we want to do? We just want to add some sort of like, we'll add like a refresh here so that when we tap on it, it just refreshes the countdown again. And then we'll end. So let's give, actually, do I have enough code to do a configure? Yes, I do. So let's just write a configure navbar, configure navbar. We'll configure the title. We'll give it some title name. Here, I'll just call it countdown. Diffable data source. Okay. I want to create a write bar item. So I'll say navigation item dot write bar button item. The write bar button item. Here I'm going to set it up with a bar button item. And the initializer we're using is bar button system item. Everybody with me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, I need to hit that audio because I do not see. So the system item, we just put dot refresh here. That's a built-in item, dot refresh. Okay. Target, what is the target? Self. What's the action we want to do? Anybody?
Refresh.
Refresh. Do we have a refresh function?
No, do we create one? Oh, wait.
What are we
No,
calling here?
unless we do configure data source.
What function do we want to run again when we click on that button?
Oh, start countdown.
Start countdown. Very good. So start countdown. Build. Make sure we have no errors.
What was the thing you use the right bar button?
Right bar button item. Oh, UI bar button item.
Okay.
And why are we having that error here?
Because that is not an Objective-C function.
Very good. Graduates of pursuit. Build and still failed because I have no selector. I'm going ahead of myself. Selector countdown. Start countdown.
Button system.
Okay, so this is configure, and then we'll just call it in our view data pair configure configure data source. Okay, cool. So we call configure data source. It gives it the title. In the nav bar, it gives it a refresh control, not refresh control. Let me not call it refresh control. It's not the same thing. It gives it a refresh button, and we could click on that refresh button, call back, start countdown, and we should be good to go. Everybody with me?
Yes.
All right.
Don't scroll from there, please.
Say that again?
I said don't scroll from there yet, please.
Oh, don't scroll from there. Yeah. You are good.
Yeah, man.
Should be funny.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So they're making building apps a bit more easier. What will be the next best thing to get into?
Swift UI after this.
Okay.
Yep. But UIKit, as we see, is not going anywhere because Apple is, like, for the last 2 years, like the advancements with like collection views is really mind blowing. The things they gave us, the things we were struggling with before, like just trying to configure something, has gotten so much easier. So UIKit definitely is the dad. He's not going away anytime soon, even if the son thinks, well, I'm the new hot thing, which is Swift UI. So cool.
I have a follow-up question. So with 5G, there's a possibility that the phone might not exist. I mean, initially it'll be there, but I don't believe the phone will exist.
As for hardware, I can't talk too much about the hardware. I don't know what 5G is going to bring us, but we'll see. All right, let us run this and see what we have. Do we have our refresh button? We do. It's counting down. We should be able to abruptly stop it, but for now, let's just let it count down all the way to our ship date. Great, we shipped our app. Restart countdown, and it restarts. Awesome. Can I interrupt it? Yes, I can. Very good. Was everybody able to replicate that?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. So again, try to use it where you can. It's just going to be better and better the more you use it. And setting up the snapshot, setting up the data source is very similar. Anything you'll be doing. And again, this is very interchangeable with a collection view. All what will change is collection view here, and that's it really. And this would be collection view, obviously. It will be UI collection view diffable data source. We'll build one more application that uses diffable data source, like an app with sections, because we haven't done multiple sections here. We've only done one section here. So we'll do an app where it uses multiple sections, and then that's going to close our chapter on diffable data sources. Yes?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Any questions about what we did today? Along the way, some of us probably saw Timer for the first time being used. Really cool class there. But definitely we also diffable data sources. And to go back to the lesson, our objectives, we pretty much nailed them. Declarative data sources, we see how easy that is just to say something and then it just works. Know how to configure, we've done this twice in the app. Understand diffable data source, how to set it up, we did that. Subclassing, we haven't done that. We'll do the subclassing once we do the second app, having multiple sections. And identify the benefits. Oh, well, we saw how cool it was to just get the thing to animate so nicely. Just setting it up and then you get all that stuff for free almost. Cool? All right.